Let's see the money, man.
You'll have to take it.
I told you to get out of here.
I apologize for not being entirely honest with you. I apologize for not revealing my true feelings. I apologize, sir, for not telling you sooner that you're a degenerate, sadistic old man.
These are the 13 most dangerous actors from Hollywood's history. Try not to gasp at number 7. From the Marine who bled on a Pacific battlefield before bleeding on screen.
What'd you see, Sergeant?
I saw the Major attacked by the prisoner and forced to defend himself, sir.
All right, have the prisoner taken back to his cell.
To the cancer survivor who went back to filming action scenes with half a lung.
Farrell, you and your brother stand clear. I got no interest in you today.
These weren't actors playing tough. They were dangerous men who happened to act, and their real lives made their movie roles look tame by comparison. So, let's have a look. Audie Murphy climbed onto a burning tank destroyer in January 1945, while German soldiers surrounded his position from 3 sides. He was 19 years old. The vehicle could explode at any second. His leg was bleeding from shrapnel, and he grabbed the machine anyway.
All right, you men, get moving. Come on!
For an hour, Murphy fired at advancing German troops while artillery shells exploded around him. He or wounded 50 enemy soldiers by himself. When his ammunition finally ran out, he climbed down and organized a counterattack with the few American soldiers who remained. The German company retreated. The Army gave him the Medal of Honor. But that was just one afternoon in a war where Murphy earned every major combat award America offered. He fought through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, France, and Germany. He participated in some of the bloodiest battles of World War II and walked away as the most decorated American soldier of the entire conflict. Hollywood saw his baby face and thought they could turn him into a leading man. What they got was something different.
I told you to get out of here.
Murphy couldn't separate himself from the war. The memories followed him everywhere. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow for the rest of his life. He suffered violent nightmares that made him dangerous to anyone sleeping nearby. His most famous film was To Hell and Back, where he played himself. The studio thought audiences would find his real war stories too unbelievable, so they toned them down for the movie. Even then, Murphy struggled through production because the combat scenes triggered flashbacks. Directors learned quickly that Murphy wasn't acting in his war films. He was remembering. The 1,000-yard stare wasn't something he practiced in front of a mirror. The way he handled weapons came from muscle memory built under fire. When he moved through scenes of combat, he moved like someone who'd actually done it. Murphy died in a plane crash in 1971 at age 45. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Thousands attended his funeral. The Hollywood career was just a footnote to a life that had already made history before he ever stepped in front of a camera. Charles Dennis Bukinski grew up in a Pennsylvania coal mining town, so poor that his family wore flour sacks as clothing. He started working in the mines at 16, crawling through tunnels where the roof could collapse and crush him at any moment. The work was brutal, the pay was barely enough to survive, and every day he went down into the darkness, knowing he might not come back up. World War II pulled him out of the mines and dropped him into a B-29 bomber as an aerial gunner. He flew 25 combat missions over the Pacific, sitting in a glass bubble while anti-aircraft fire tried to blow him out of the sky. The survival rate for bomber crews was low enough that every mission felt like gambling with death. After the war, Bronson tried to break into acting, but his last name was a problem. Bukinski sounded too Russian, too foreign, too communist for 1950s America. The fear of being blacklisted for his ethnic surname forced him to abandon his family name entirely. He became Charles Bronson, choosing something that sounded American and safe.
All yours. Hey, Pops, you're a little old for this, ain't you?
The name change didn't erase what those early years had built into him. Bronson carried himself like someone who'd survived things that killed other men. His face looked like it had been carved from stone. His eyes held something that made people nervous. Directors cast him as the heavy because audiences believed he could actually hurt someone. Death Wish in 1974 turned him into a star at age 53. He played a man who turned into a vigilante after his family was attacked.
I see the money, man.
You'll have to take it.
The role fit perfectly because Bronson had spent his entire life looking like violence was just one decision away. He didn't have to pretend to be dangerous. He just had to show up. Bronson worked steadily until his 70s, playing tough guys and killers, and men who'd seen too much. He died in 2003 at age 81. By then, the name Bukinski was almost forgotten, but the coal mines and the bomber missions and the poverty that shaped him never really left. They were always there behind his eyes. Lee Marvin hit the beach at Saipan in June 1944 as a Marine private. The Japanese had fortified the island with thousands of troops who'd been ordered to fight to the death. What followed was some of the most brutal combat of the Pacific War. Marvin made it 80 yards inland before a machine bullet hit him. The round severed his sciatic nerve. Marvin went down and couldn't get back up. He lay there while the battle raged around him, bleeding into the sand, waiting for medics who might never reach him. When they finally got to him, they expected him to die from the wound. Instead, he spent 13 months recovering in naval hospitals. The Marine Corps gave him a Purple Heart and a medical discharge.
And I guess that's where I learned how to act.
In the Marines?
Yeah.
But you picked up a Purple Heart, which is something we don't hear too often, and you're suitably modest about it. How did you win that?
You don't win them. You get them when you get hit.
The nerve damage left him with a permanent limp and chronic pain that would plague him for the rest of his life. He walked differently after Saipan. He moved like someone who'd learned that bodies break easier than most people realize. Hollywood didn't know what to do with Marvin at first. He was too hard, too real, too uncomfortable for leading man roles. So they cast him as villains and thugs. He played men who killed without hesitation because he'd actually done it. When he pointed a gun at someone on screen, there was weight behind it that other actors couldn't fake. The Dirty Dozen in 1967 finally gave him a role that matched what he actually was, a combat veteran leading other violent men on a suicide mission. Marvin didn't have to pretend to understand military discipline or combat stress or what it meant to follow orders that would probably get you. He'd lived it.
What'd you see, Sergeant?
I saw the Major attacked by the prisoner, forced to defend himself, sir.
All right, have the prisoner taken back to his cell.
Directors noticed something about Marvin during action scenes. He never flinched at explosions. Blanks being fired didn't make him blink. While other actors jumped at loud noises, Marvin stayed calm because nothing on a movie set came close to what he'd experienced on Saipan. Marvin died in 1987 at age 63. The sciatic nerve damage from that beach had never fully healed. For 43 years, he'd carried that bullet wound through every role, every film, every scene. The pain was always there. He just learned to work through it the same way he'd worked through everything else. Steve McQueen joined the Marines in 1947 at 17. He was a troublemaker who'd already spent time in reform school and juvenile detention. The Corps was supposed to straighten him out. Instead, it nearly killed him during a training exercise in the Arctic. 5 Marines fell through ice during maneuvers in freezing water. McQueen saw them go under and didn't hesitate. He went in after them while other Marines stood frozen, either from fear or from not knowing what to do. McQueen pulled all 5 men out of the water before hypothermia could kill them. The Corps noted it in his record and moved on. That same recklessness followed McQueen into Hollywood. He did his own stunts not because directors demanded it, but because sitting still was impossible for him. He rode motorcycles at dangerous speeds. He raced cars professionally. In 1970, he competed in the 12 Hours of Sebring endurance race with a cast on his broken foot and finished second. The Great Escape in 1963 showcased what made McQueen different from other actors. The motorcycle chase wasn't just acting. McQueen actually performed most of those jumps and stunts himself, riding at speeds that could have killed him if he'd made a single mistake. Insurance companies tried to stop him. Directors begged him to use a double. McQueen did it anyway. Bullet in 1968 featured one of the most famous car chases in film history. McQueen drove that Mustang himself through San Francisco streets at over 100 miles per hour. No rear projection, no camera tricks, just McQueen behind the wheel pushing a muscle car to its limits through city traffic. Racing became as important to McQueen as acting. He competed professionally whenever his shooting schedule allowed. Other racers knew he wasn't some Hollywood pretender. He had the skills and the nerve to compete at the highest levels. He crashed multiple times. He kept racing. McQueen died of cancer in 1980 at age 50. The disease took him fast, despite experimental treatment in Mexico. Right up until the end, he was still talking about getting back on a motorcycle or behind the wheel of a race car. Sitting still had never been an option. Kirk Douglas wrestled competitively before Hollywood knew his name. He grew up poor enough that fighting for money made sense. The wrestling taught him how to absorb punishment and keep moving, how to take a hit and not quit. Those lessons would define the rest of his life. World War II put Douglas in the Navy as a communications officer. He spent the war on submarine patrols, never seeing the dramatic combat that other actors experienced, but learning a different kind of danger, the slow tension of hunting enemy ships. The knowledge that one torpedo or depth charge could send you to the bottom with no escape. His film career took off in the late 1940s and stayed hot for decades.
I apologize for not being entirely honest with you. I apologize for not revealing my true feelings. I apologize, sir, for not telling you sooner that you're a degenerate, sadistic old man.
Douglas played tough characters because he understood what toughness actually required. Champion in 1949 had him playing a ruthless boxer. Spartacus in 1960 had him leading a slave rebellion. The roles demanded physical intensity that Douglas delivered without fakery. In 1991, a helicopter Douglas was riding in crashed during takeoff. 2 people died in the accident. Douglas survived with a broken back and severe injuries that should have ended his career at age 74. Doctors told him he'd never work again. He was back on set within months. 5 years later, Douglas suffered a severe stroke that paralyzed the left side of his face and impaired his speech. Again, doctors suggested retirement. Again, Douglas refused. He spent years in rehabilitation, relearning how to speak clearly, how to control his facial expressions, how to act with a body that no longer fully obeyed him. Douglas kept working into his 90s.
When I had my stroke and I couldn't talk at all, what good is an actor who cannot talk?
He took smaller roles that accommodated his limitations. He gave speeches despite the speech impediment. He wrote books. He refused to let age or injury or disability define what he could accomplish. The same stubbornness that got him through poverty and war and wrestling matches kept him going when his body tried to quit. He died in 2020 at age 103. He'd outlived most of his contemporaries by decades. The helicopter crash and stroke that should have killed him became just more obstacles he'd survived through sheer refusal to stop. James Cagney grew up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan when it was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in America. Street gangs controlled blocks. Violence was common enough that learning to fight wasn't optional. Cagney started boxing as a teenager because it was better than getting beaten up by kids who already knew how. He fought as an amateur, learning the footwork and hand speed that would later make his movie fight scenes look different from other actors. Cagney didn't stage fight like he was performing. He moved like someone who'd actually thrown punches that mattered. His footwork was economical. His combinations were fast and brutal. Directors noticed that Cagney's fights looked real because the mechanics behind them were real. Public Enemy in 1931 made Cagney a star, playing a violent criminal. The famous scene where he shoves a grapefruit in Mae Clark's face shocked audiences because of how casually violent it was. Cagney played the moment like hurting someone was just another Tuesday. No hesitation, no remorse, just action.
Hey, Tom, where you going? Home. But Patty... I don't care what Patty said. I'm getting out of this.
Studios kept casting him as gangsters and tough guys because Cagney made violence look easy. When he hit someone on screen, the impact looked genuine. When he moved through fight choreography, he moved with the muscle memory of someone who'd learned boxing in gyms where getting hit back was guaranteed. Angels with Dirty Faces in 1938 showcased Cagney's range. He played a gangster who'd grown up in the same rough neighborhood Cagney actually came from.
You asked me to pull an act, join Yella, so those kids will think I'm no good. You asked me to throw away the only thing I got left, the only thing you haven't been able to take away from me.
The authenticity wasn't acting. Cagney knew exactly what those streets felt like. He knew what poverty and violence did to kids. He'd lived it before Hollywood gave him an escape route. Other actors studied Cagney's fighting style trying to copy it, but they couldn't replicate what years of amateur boxing had built into his muscle memory. They could learn choreography. They couldn't learn the reflexes and timing that came from actual sparring. Cagney had something they could watch but never truly duplicate. He retired from acting in 1961 and died in 1986 at age 86. By then, action movies had moved toward martial arts and gunplay, but Cagney's influence remained in every actor who tried to make screen violence look quick and efficient and real. John Wayne went into surgery in 1964 expecting bad news. Doctors found it. The cancer had spread through his left lung and into his ribs. They removed the entire lung and cut out several ribs to get all the cancer. Wayne woke up with half his breathing capacity and a chest cavity that would never feel right again. Most men would have retired at 57 after losing a lung. Wayne was back on set filming The Sons of Katie Elder within months.
Billy. Hello, John.
The role required horseback riding, fighting, and long days in the Texas heat. Wayne did it all while breathing with one lung and dealing with pain from where his ribs used to be. The physical toll was obvious to anyone who watched him work after the surgery. Wayne moved differently. He got winded faster. Long takes became harder because his oxygen levels dropped, but he refused to take easier roles or step back from the physical demands of being an action star. Directors learned to adjust shooting schedules around Wayne's limitations. They'd shoot his more demanding scenes early in the day when he had the most energy. They'd build in breaks so Wayne could catch his breath, but they never suggested using a double or cutting scenes. Wayne wouldn't have allowed it anyway. True Grit came 5 years after the surgery. Wayne rode horses, fought in dusty streets, and carried the entire film at age 62 with one lung.
Farrell, you and your brother stand clear. I got no interest in you today.
He won his only Academy Award for the role. When he accepted the Oscar, nobody mentioned that he'd done it all while breathing through half the equipment he was born with. The cancer came back in 1979. This time it hit his stomach, and there was no surgery that would fix it. Wayne made one final public appearance at the Academy Awards that April, looking gaunt and weak. 2 months later, he was dead at age 72. His last film was The Shootist in 1976, where he played a dying gunfighter with cancer. The parallel was obvious, but Wayne never acknowledged it publicly. He just kept working until his body absolutely refused to continue. Robert Mitchum rode the rails during the Great Depression as a teenage hobo. He worked coal mines when he could find work. He boxed professionally when mining jobs dried up. And in 1933, he got arrested for vagrancy in Georgia and ended up on a chain gang. The chain gang was legal slavery. Prisoners worked in fields under armed guards who could shoot anyone who tried to run. They slept in barracks and ate barely enough food to survive. The experience gave Mitchum firsthand knowledge of a brutality that most Americans never saw. He escaped after a week by slipping out at night and kept moving. Hollywood found Mitchum in the 1940s and tried to turn him into a leading man. What they got was someone who'd seen too much to pretend life was clean or fair. Mitchum played characters with the same hardness. Men who'd been through something and came out different on the other side.
I don't want to die.
Neither do I, baby, but if I have to, I'm gonna die last.
In 1948, Mitchum got arrested for marijuana possession. The studio expected his career to end. Instead, Mitchum served 60 days and came back more popular than before. Audiences liked that he didn't apologize or try to rehabilitate his image. He'd done time and didn't care who knew it. Directors learned that Mitchum brought authenticity to any role involving hardship. When he played a prisoner or a drifter or someone living rough, he wasn't acting. He knew what hunger felt like. He knew what it meant to sleep outside in winter. He knew what happened in places where the law could do whatever it wanted to people nobody cared about. Cape Fear in 1962 had Mitchum playing a violent ex-convict, hunting the lawyer who put him away. The menace wasn't manufactured. Mitchum understood what prison did to men. He understood the kind of rage that built up behind bars and what happened when it finally got released.
You're gonna be old and gray before I ever leave this town.
Mitchum kept working into his 70s, playing tired men who'd seen everything. He died in 1997 at age 79. The chain gang and the hobo years and the boxing matches were decades behind him by then, but they'd shaped everything about how he moved through the world and how he played men who'd survived things that killed others. Anthony Quinn grew up in poverty that made physical labor inevitable. He worked as a butcher, hauling meat carcasses that weighed more than most men could lift. He worked construction, carrying materials up scaffolding in the heat. His body got built through necessity rather than gyms or training regimens. Quinn also boxed professionally for a time, not as a career, but as a way to make money when other work ran out. He learned to take punches and keep fighting. He learned what it meant to trade pain for dollars. The boxing didn't last long, but it left marks that never completely faded. Hollywood cast Quinn in supporting roles at first, usually as ethnic characters or tough guys.
What the hell are you doing?
Christians always...
His physical presence was impossible to ignore. He moved like someone who'd spent years doing hard labor. His hands looked like they gripped tools and hauled weight. Everything about him signaled that comfort had never been an option. Viva Zapata in 1952 had Quinn playing Marlon Brando's brother in the Mexican Revolution. Quinn's physicality made the role believable. He looked like someone who'd fought his way through life rather than someone playing at Revolution. He won an Oscar for the supporting performance. La Strada in 1954 showcased Quinn's ability to play brutal characters. He played a traveling strongman who treated people as badly as he'd been treated by life. The cruelty wasn't exaggerated. Quinn understood what poverty and desperation did to people. He'd seen it. He'd lived it. Quinn kept working into his 80s, playing powerful men and father figures. The years of physical labor had built a body that aging couldn't completely break down. Even in his final roles, Quinn carried himself like someone who could still handle himself in a fight if necessary. He died in 2001 at age 86. By then, few people remembered the butcher shops and construction sites, but that foundation had shaped every role he played. Quinn never forgot where he came from or what he'd done to survive before acting gave him another option. Charlton Heston enlisted in the Army Air Forces during World War II and trained as an aerial gunner. The job involved sitting in a bomber while enemy fighters tried to shoot you down, and anti-aircraft fire exploded around the plane. Survival rates were low enough that every mission felt like borrowed time. Heston served stateside rather than seeing combat overseas. But the training was real and the danger was real. Planes crashed during training exercises, equipment malfunctioned, men died learning how to be aerial gunners. Heston came through it understanding that military service meant accepting death as a possibility. Ben-Hur in 1959 required months of chariot training. Heston was already in his mid-30s, but he insisted on doing the racing scenes himself. The chariots were moving at dangerous speeds. The stunts involved real risk of serious injury or death. Heston trained obsessively until he could handle the horses and the chariot like a professional. The famous chariot race scene took 5 weeks to film. Heston performed almost all of it himself with minimal use of stunt doubles. When the chariot flipped, or horses reared, or wheels splintered, Heston was actually there controlling the vehicle while chaos erupted around him. He won an Oscar for a performance that could have killed him. Planet of the Apes in 1968 had Heston performing physical stunts well into his 40s. Running scenes, fighting scenes, climbing scenes. Directors offered to use doubles. Heston refused. He'd spent his career performing his own stunts and wasn't about to stop because he was getting older. Heston kept doing action roles into his 60s. Earthquake, Airport 1975. The physicality never stopped being part of his appeal. He moved like someone who understood discipline and didn't need safety nets. He died in 2008 at age 84 from pneumonia. His career had spanned 6 decades of performing stunts that modern insurance policies wouldn't allow. The aerial gunnery training from World War II had taught him not to flinch at danger. He carried that lesson through every role. Clint Eastwood got drafted into the Army during the Korean War and ended up at Fort Ord in California as a lifeguard. It wasn't combat duty, but it gave Eastwood military discipline and structure that would shape how he approached everything afterward. When Eastwood transitioned to acting, he brought that military precision with him. He didn't tolerate waste or inefficiency. He showed up prepared. He did what needed to be done without complaints. Directors appreciated working with someone who treated film sets like military operations. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in 1966 was filmed in brutal conditions in the Spanish desert. Temperatures exceeded 100 degrees. Dust storms shut down production. The conditions were miserable. Eastwood never complained. He just showed up and did the work, the same way he'd shown up for duty at Fort Ord. Eastwood insisted on realism in his films, real locations instead of sound stages when possible, practical stunts instead of effects. He performed his own stunts throughout the 1960s and 70s, doing fights and jumps and falls that other actors would have handed off to doubles. As Eastwood transitioned to directing, he brought the same efficient approach. His shoots ran on time and under budget. He didn't do multiple takes unless absolutely necessary. The military training had taught him that wasted time was wasted money and wasted opportunity. Unforgiven in 1992 had Eastwood back in the saddle at age 62, playing an aging gunfighter. He still did his own writing and most of his stunts. The performance earned him Best Director and Best Picture Oscars. He proved that discipline and preparation could extend a career beyond what most actors manage. Eastwood kept directing and occasionally acting into his 90s. The work ethic from Fort Ord never faded. He approached every project with military efficiency and refused to coast on his reputation. Jack Palance flew bombing missions over Japan as part of the Army Air Forces during World War II. The B-24 Liberator he flew in wasn't the safest aircraft. Crews called them flying coffins because they caught fire easily and went down hard. Palance completed his missions and survived, but the plane he'd flown in later crashed with a different crew, killing everyone aboard. After the war, Palance's face bore burn scars from a separate training accident. The scarring gave him a distinctive look that Hollywood would later exploit for villain roles. But the scars came from real fire, real pain, real survival. Palance broke into Hollywood playing menacing characters. Shane in 1953 had him as a hired killer who moved with controlled violence. The performance earned an Oscar nomination and established Palance as someone who could make audiences genuinely uncomfortable. Directors discovered that Palance insisted on performing his own stunts. Fight scenes, horse falls, dangerous physical action. Palance approached stunt work the same way he'd approach bombing missions, as necessary risks that you took without complaint. Palance's physicality remained intimidating into his later years. At age 73, he famously did one-arm push-ups during his Oscar acceptance speech for City Slickers. The display wasn't showboating. It was Palance demonstrating that age hadn't softened what the war and the stunts had built. Throughout his career, Palance maintained a reputation for intensity that went beyond acting. Co-stars described him as genuinely intimidating, even off camera. The combination of his war service, his physical presence, and his willingness to do dangerous stunts created someone that people naturally gave space to. Palance died in 2006 at age 87. The bomber missions were 6 decades behind him by then, but the toughness they'd required never fully left. Every role, every stunt, every performance carried echoes of a man who'd flown into enemy fire and come back alive. Sam Peckinpah served in the Army during World War II and came out trained as a marksman. He knew how to handle weapons, how to shoot accurately, how to maintain discipline under pressure. That training would define both his life and his films. Peckinpah became famous as a director rather than an actor, but his personal toughness influenced everything he created. The Wild Bunch in 1969 revolutionized screen violence by making it realistic and brutal. Peckinpah knew what real violence looked like because he'd been trained in it. His approach to filmmaking was confrontational. He fought with studios constantly. He fought with actors. He drank heavily and got into physical altercations. The same aggression that made his films powerful made him nearly impossible to work with. Crew members described Peckinpah as genuinely dangerous when he was drinking. He'd get into fights on set. He'd fire weapons into the air to make points during arguments. His volatility wasn't an act or a quirky personality trait. It was legitimate instability backed by weapons training and a willingness to use it. Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia in 1974 showcased Peckinpah's obsession with masculine violence. The film was brutal and nihilistic. Critics hated it. Peckinpah didn't care. He made films that explored the kind of violence he understood personally, regardless of whether audiences wanted to watch it. Studios eventually stopped hiring Peckinpah because he was too difficult and too dangerous. His drinking got worse. His behavior got more erratic. Films went over budget and over schedule because Peckinpah couldn't be controlled or managed. He died in 1984 at age 59, with his career essentially over. Peckinpah's legacy is complicated. His films influenced generations of directors. His personal behavior made him unemployable. The line between artistic vision and dangerous instability was never clear with him. The Army marksmanship training had given him skills that translated to cinema, but also fed into self-destructive patterns that eventually consumed him. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.